And so we've been in this series on kingdom culture, kingdom values, and we've been following along, and it's been a revelation for me, and I hope for many of you too. So I just want to add another layer to that kingdom mentality, that kingdom outlook, that kingdom focus. And so this morning, I want to be talking about kingdom identity. Kingdom identity, because I feel like we live in a world where anyone, anywhere, any age, any race, any gender can identify or choose to identify however they want. And we're in a society where we're more confused than ever about identity. In an attempt to belong somewhere or to someone or to something, we cling to identities that really just aren't who we are. And so halfway through last year, I flew back to Samoa, which is my motherland, I guess. My parents are Samoan. And so I flew back to Samoa to become a Samoan chief. And so if I was here this morning, if there were Samoans with us this morning, you guys would all be on your knees. No, I'm joking. But Samoan, I'm a Samoan chief, and in Samoa that means something. And I come back to work, and I've got to work for my boss. And I don't get paid like a chief here in Australia. So identity crisis. I'm a king in Samoa. I come back to Australia, I'm an employee. And so desperately and usually in despair, we, in our brokenness, latch onto labels sometimes our parents have given us, labels we've given ourselves, and we take it to mean our identity. We take it to be our identity, and sometimes they're curses that have been spoken over generations. We're broke. We're just broke. That's just how it is. We've lived in Hauso forever. And in Sydney, that was part of my story. We lived in a rough area, in housing commission, in Western Sydney. And for a while, that was my identity. We're just broke, we're just Hauso, this is just it. This is just where we live, that's just who we are. And can I tell you, however you identify, that's how you function. However you identify, that's how you function. Your function follows your identity. Example, if I say I'm a Hauso, I'll keep speaking like Shazza and F-bombs everywhere. I'd speak like that, I'd live like that, I'd talk like that. And it was my story for a while. Negative influence. And so vice versa, Jesus' example, I am the bread of life, identity. And he goes on to feed thousands of people, function. Influence, everyone's fed. I want to lay a platform of your identity, your function follows your identity, which gives us our influence. Another example, Jesus, I am the way, the truth, and the life. And so he's crucified. Identity, function. Influence is the whole world saved. Jesus, I am the resurrection and the life. Identity. Raises Lazarus from the dead. Function. God is glorified. Influence. And so before we get into scripture, I just wanted to lay a bit of a platform, and I want to set a foundation to preface that, because it'll make sense when we get into the scripture. I'm going to be reading from Matthew 5, verse 13 and 16. And if you've got your Bible with you, it's like 3/4 of the way back in the Bible. The first book of the New Testament, written by Matthew. Matthew 5, I'm going to be going from 13 till about 16. But I just want to quickly read through the Beatitudes, because we've been going through kingdom identity, kingdom culture, kingdom principles, kingdom values. And I think the Beatitudes are a good example of what somebody with kingdom values should look like. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled. Blessed are the merciful, for they will be shown mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called the children of God. Blessed are those who persecuted because of righteousness, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. And so we're getting into the introduction of the most famous sermon ever written, recorded, studied, preached. And I don't know if you just saw what I did, but I went to scroll up on my Bible. I'm still trying to do it. And so we're going to read from 13 to 16. I think the Beatitudes are a great place to start. It gives us kingdom principles, kingdom values, and that's who somebody that carries kingdom culture just has with them. That's how you can see, that's how you can tell that that's somebody that carries kingdom culture. And in our home group, Trev posed a question and said, I've been loving learning about kingdom, the kingdom of heaven and the kingdom of heaven coming down to earth. I've been loving learning in this series, but what is it? What does it look like? Somebody draw me something. And so Trev's not here. He's at camp in Dargo where we all are, but Trev will be watching this later on. I told him he's got to watch it back. So we're going to be reading from 13. You are the salt of the earth. But if the salt loses its saltiness, how can it be made salty again? It is no longer good for anything except to be thrown out and trampled underfoot. And so our God-given identity here in Matthew 5, God says that we are salt of the earth. And no one got up and cheered and danced and paraded, because that just reminds us of a jar that sits in our pantry. But in the first century, salt meant something totally different. And I posed this question to our youth a couple of Friday nights ago, and I said, what do we think salt means? And we had somebody say, salt is good for seasoning. And that could preach really well. We could add flavor to the world, add flavor into our areas of influence, our place of work. We could add flavor, and God could say, go be the flavor in the earth. That could preach a good message. There was other uses of salt. Salt was also used as wages. It was that sought after. Roman soldiers were paid in salt instead of coin, because that's how valuable salt was. Salt used to be used as a contract, to bind a contract in the first century. When two farmers would agree on a piece of land, they would eat salt together, and that binded their contract together. Salt had many uses in the first century, but the main use of salt in the first century AD was to use as a preservative, was to stop decay. And so in context, for today, God is calling us to stop decay in our world. Our identity as the salt of the earth, and God plugs us into the earth as salt to stop decay in this world. In this world that is spiritually decaying, we're called to stop decay in our workplaces, stop decay in our school, in our communities. And if we are honest, for just a second, justice is decaying. Honor is decaying. Virtue is decaying. Common courtesy is decaying. So God, in all his glory, all-knowing, almighty, all-powerful, looks at you, Carly, calls you by name and says, Carly, you are to stop the youth in Bairnsdale from decaying. That your house, and I've said this to you before, your house will be a safe haven for the boys that are lurking the streets, usually on a Friday night, to instead come and wait for the big white van to come pick them up for youth. And that's what it looks like. Come here. This is what it looks like. This is me painting a picture for Trev. This is what it looks like. Jordan, stopping decay in your area, in your area of influence, your workplace. Come here. Sarah, stopping decay in the schools that we work in. Come here. Joel. Where's Joel? Stopping decay in the youth ministry. Yeah, come on. Get the message, mate.
Feel the love.
Brad, if you can. Stopping decay in the workplace. Kath, stopping decay wherever you are. Your smile stops decay at the core. Steve, stopping decay in your workplace. And this is a picture of God plugging us as the salt of the earth in our community, in our workplaces, in the youth ministry, in the streets, in our schools, in our community, in Bairnsdale. Thank you, everybody. Thank you. Joel, you can stay. There are your 2 cups over there. And so to be salt of the earth, we've got to be that close. I've never, ever seen anybody. I was a chef for 13 years of my life. Straight out of high school, did an apprenticeship, worked as a chef all the way up until COVID, and I started working in schools. But I've never in my life done this myself or seen anyone do it. Grab 1 speck of salt. I can't reach that. Grab 1 speck of salt and put it on their steak. Never. And so when we're seasoning and when God is plugging us into our communities, into our area of influence, this is what he's doing. There's got to be heaps of us. It's ineffective when it's just 1 speck of salt. We've got to be a united front. And so I asked Joel this morning to tell me which one was the salt and which one was the sugar.
Salt.
You cheated.
What? It's different granulation.
Okay. Which one's the salt, which one's the sugar?
Salt.
If he didn't cheat, he wouldn't know. But I tell you how he'd figure it out. He'd have to taste it. You'd have to be so close you could smell it. You could smell the sweat on a Friday night when the youth are running around, jumping around. And you've got to be so close you could almost taste it. That's how you know, taste and see that the Lord is good. And so that's our kingdom identity. Which one's salt, which one's sugar?
That's definitely salt.
Thank you. And so that's our kingdom identity. Let's get into the function. You are the light of the world, a town built on a hill that cannot be hidden. Our function is to be seen by the world. Our function is to be seen by our community, in our community. Our function is not to take part, but to partake, to take over, to add the voice of God in our circumstances. In reading and studying for today's message, I just put identity in YouTube, and you'll find 100 videos of debates on identity that have nothing to do with God. Nothing to do with God. And so our function is to bring those conversations or bring God into those conversations. It's like, who here uses iPhone? It's like all of us having a meeting and say, hey, we're gonna meet and talk about how we're gonna upgrade the iPhone. We're just not gonna invite Apple to the table. They're just not included in the meeting. These are the conversations people are having online on all platforms about identity without God in the conversation. Redgum Youth has been that light in the world, in our community, impacting our kids, and we want to highlight what the statistics don't show, what the stats don't measure. Because the statistics show percentages. And yes, they help fund, in my experience and the area of influence that I'm in, more godless remedies, more godless conversations. And where we're seeing what we're seeing is week in, week out, the proof that we need. The same kids coming back after going to a youth camp for the very first time, and one of the girls running up to me and saying, what are they doing? And it was a bunch of kids that have been going to youth for a while, and they're secure, and they know who they worship, and our guys are really green, really new to learning who Jesus is, and coming into that environment. Yes, there was a culture shock for them, but I'm so glad we went. I'm so glad they got to see what God had in store for them. For many of our kids, jumping up and down to Jesus music was a party. Like, they didn't understand what it was. I was so privileged and honored to be able to introduce a side of worship that they didn't understand. And that's our function. Verse 15 says, neither do people light a lamp and put it under a bowl. Instead, they put it on its stand, and it gives light to everyone in the house. And your stand doesn't need to be a pulpit. Your stand can be the lunchroom at your workplace. Your stand can be aisle 4 in Audi. Your stand can be at camp in Dargo, laying upside down on a half blown up mattress. Our function is to shine and give light to everyone in the house. Verse 16, in the same way, let your light shine before others, that they may see your good deeds and glorify your Father in heaven. And so we come to our influence. So that they may see your good deeds, not to glorify us, not to glorify who we are, what we do, what we're about, but to glorify your Father in heaven. Let your light shine before others. It reminded me of last night when my batteries of my torch ran out, and I had to follow Jess to the bathroom, and she had the light shining like right in front of me. It was dark everywhere else, but she had the torch and she was leading the way. And it says there, in the same way, let your light shine before others, And I see Christians leading the way for others, shining our light, who is Jesus Christ, before others. I'm going to read that 13 to 16 all together. Like I said, there's something in my spirit that tells me that we've got to return to worship this morning. But I'm going to read from 13 to 16. Can I get the band back up? That's all right. Matthew 13, 16. You are the salt of the earth. But if the salt loses its saltiness, how can it be made salty again? It is no longer good for anything except to be thrown out and trampled underfoot. You are the light of the world. A town built on a hill cannot be hidden. Neither do people light a lamp and put it under a bowl. Instead, they put it on its stand, and it gives light to everyone in the house. The kingdom culture and what we've been speaking about for the last 5 weeks now, it's not a trend. It's our identity. It's who we are. And before anything else, before doing anything extra, all we've got to do is embrace that identity. Is say, yes, you know what? I am the salt of the earth. I am the salt of the earth. I'm the salt in my school. I'm the salt in my workplace. I will stop decay where I see it. I will stop decay in my area of influence. I will stop decay wherever I see it. There was one part of this that I didn't preach on, and that's the part that says, if the salt loses its saltiness, how can it be made salty again? And every time I read that, every time I looked at that, the last few weeks, I just lost it. And I keep losing it. Because there's a part in me that struggles every time I'm up here to, even though I'm preaching and I'm believing what I'm saying, there's a part of me that says, you lost your saltiness once upon a time. And that's this walk that we walk. From time to time, we lose our saltiness. And can I explain to you what that means before we go on any further? And the band plays us a tune and a melody. The only way in the 1st century AD, when they were harvesting salt, the only way salt became rendered useless or lost its salt was when it became contaminated. And this life will contaminate you. Sin will contaminate you. And that's just a given. That happens in this walk that we walk. But God calls you the salt of the earth. And we've just got to embrace that identity and say, yes, I am the salt of the earth. Once upon a time, I lost my saltiness, and I wasn't very salty, and they said that they'd chuck me out so I could be trampled on, but God calls me back to salt of the earth. God says, no, my word for you is you are the salt of the earth in your area of influence, whether it's a school, whether it's your workplace, whether it's your home, whether it's your marriage. You are the salt of the earth. Start behaving like it. Start acting like it. Walk on the truth that God has for you. Let's go. Come on. Let's share in a moment of worship. And that's part of your story. And you feel like maybe you've lost your saltiness, and there's doubt, and there's worry, and there's anxiety. Can I just encourage you? Can I just help you brush that off and remind you that God calls you to be the salt of the earth? And this is exactly what it means, that this is your kingdom identity. All you've got to do is embrace it. All you've got to do is accept it and live in it and walk by faith, because this is your identity. God calls us to be the salt of the earth. God says that you are more than a conqueror. God says that you are the resurrection and life through Jesus. God says that you are more. You are more